verse 1 through 12. Book of 1 Samuel chapter 5, verses 1 through 12. Book of 1 Samuel chapter 5, verses 1 through 12. Okay, so just follow along as I read. The Philistines took the ark of God and brought it from Ebenezer unto Ashdod. And when the Philistines took the ark of God, they brought it into the house of Dagon and set it by Dagon. Dagon is a fish god that is what they're talking about here, so it's an idol basically, other than God. And in verse 3, and it says, And when they of Ashdod arose early on the morrow, behold, Dagon was fallen upon his face to the earth before the ark of the Lord. And he took Dagon and set him on his place again. And when they arose early in the morrow morning, behold, Dagon was fallen upon his face to the ground before the ark of the Lord, and the head of Dagon and both the palms of his hands were cut off from the threshold, and only the stump of Dagon was left there. Therefore neither the priests of Dagon, nor any that come into Dagon's house, tread on the threshold of Dagon in Ashdod unto this day. But the hand of the Lord was heavy upon them of Ashdod. He destroyed them, and smote them with emerods. Even Ashdod and the coast thereof. And when the men of Ashdod saw this, that it was so, they said, The ark of God of Israel shall not abide with us, for his hand is sore upon us, and upon Dagon our God. They sent therefore and gathered all the lords of the Philistines unto them, and said, What shall we do with the ark of the God of Israel? And they answered, Let the ark of God of Israel be carried about unto Gath. And they carried the ark of God of Israel about thither. Verse 9. And it was so that after they had carried it about, the hand of the Lord was against the city with a very great destruction. And he smote the men of the city, both small and great, and they had emerods in their secret parts. Therefore they sent the ark of God to Ekron, and it came to pass as the ark of God came to Ekron, that the Ekronites cried out, saying, They have brought the ark of God of Israel to us, to slay us and our people. So they sent and gathered together all the lords of the Philistines, and said, Send away the ark of the God of Israel, and let it go again to his own place, that it slay us not, and to our people. For there was a deadly destruction throughout all the city, and the hand of God was heavy there. And the last verse 12 reads, And the men that died there were not smitten with emerods, and the cry of the city went up to heaven. Okay, before we jump into our lesson, let's go and pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we just thank you once again for another Sunday just to be in your house, just to listen to your word. I just pray for the message today that you laid upon my heart. Just help the teens and the adults here to understand your word, just help them to focus on your word, just help this truth be applied to our lives. Just be with us today as we learn about idolatry, just help us to understand how to combat it, and just to fight against it. And once again, we just thank you for this day, and just pray for those that couldn't make it today, just pray to keep them safe. And in Jesus' name I pray, amen. So I was working on this sermon yesterday, and I had to break it into two parts, because it's really long. So this is going to be the first part where we talk about like the back history of what happened, and then the next part we'll get into the meat of the sermon. So once again, we're talking about idolatry. We're talking about Dagon, the fish god. So before we jump into our message, let's talk about what happened before. So here we are in the book of 1 Samuel chapter 4. There's this great war that happened that was against the Philistines and the Israelites. And here in chapter 4, the Israelite army was completely demolished by the Philistines. They were completely wiped out. And the Israeli army was completely destroyed by the enemy, basically. So let me ask you this. Raise your hand if you know the answer to this question, but who are the Israelites? Does anybody know? Who is Israel?
God's people.
They're from Israel. Okay, God's people. Good. Anything else?
They worship God.
They worship God. They're God's people. Okay.
They worshipped many gods before.
So Israel is God's chosen people. There's a verse in the Bible where it says Israel is the apple of his eye, which basically means it's his center focus. It's his most important people in that sense. So if this makes you wonder, why would God allow Israel, his own people, to get killed, to lose? I mean, aren't Israelites part of God's army? Isn't Israel his holy people? Why would God allow 30,000 people to be killed?
Because they sinned.
Because they sinned. Okay? So remember, this is God's holy people. This is God's chosen people. And to think that, God would allow something like this to happen is kind of crazy to think about. And like David said, the answer to this is probably because of sin. It makes you realize that God doesn't withhold judgment even from his own people. Like a father, punishes his son for doing something bad. The same thing with God punishes his children for doing something bad. I know it's a little extreme to understand that, he killed 30,000 people. But the main point is God's character doesn't change. His character doesn't change on sin. His attitude doesn't change on sin. You see, when we regard sin as God does, we start to understand that nothing is humorous or amusing about doing bad things. That word amusement means to be entertained by. So if we're entertained by sin, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Bad.
Probably a bad thing. Okay, good. The more we understand God's character and His holiness and His purity and the fact that He doesn't sin, the fact that He hates evil, it makes us understand how we're supposed to live as a Christian. And here we see in chapter 4 of 1 Samuel, the backstory before the actual battle begins. These were the Philistines that knew that the God of Israel was with them. They knew that the God of Israel had wiped out Egypt before, had conquered many people that Israel fought before. So they knew that this battle was going to go not in their favor. They knew that they felt like they were going to die. But worse comes to worse, when the battle actually happens, the Israel people were completely slaughtered. And 30,000 people were killed. And this was not what the Philistines were thinking. They were thinking, oh no, this is the God of Israel that had wiped out Egypt, that had used Moses to take out the slaves from the Egyptian people. And they've always taken care of His people. God has always taken care of Israel. But now it comes to a point when they're face to face with the Israeli army and they're scared, they're trembling. And there's 30,000 people against, I think the Philistine army was like a lot more than that. It was a lot bigger amount. So they thought they could win this war. But in the end, the Israeli people lost and the Philistine people won. So you can imagine, why would God's people be killed by this? His chosen people, His holy people, His pure people. And as it reads in 1 Samuel chapter 4, verses 7 and 8, it's in your notes. And it says, the Philistines were afraid, for they said, God has come into the camp. And they said, woe unto us, for there had not been such a thing before. Woe unto us, who shall deliver us out of the hand of these mighty gods. These are the gods that smote the Egyptians with all the plagues in the wilderness. Can you hear the worry in the words of the Philistines? They were basically, crying, saying that they thought that they were going to be conquered by Israel, that they were going to be destroyed by Israel. They stated, who's going to save us from God's hand? Who's going to save us from the Israeli God? They knew that this was the same God who had brought the slaves out of Egypt, who had, conquered the Egyptian Pharaoh. They were saying that this is a God that helped Israel conquer anyone in its path. Usually when Israel went into a battle with somebody, usually Israel won, like 100% of the time. And why? Because, God's powerful, God's, strong in that sense. But in this case, because of their sin, because of their lack of faith in that sense, we'll understand why this came to be. We'll understand why, 30,000 people of God had died. So first, let's talk about a direct disobedience. You see, even though the Philistines didn't know a lot about God, they recognized the power that the God of Israel had. They understood what could happen when going into battle with the Israelites. They thought today was going to be a slaughter of their own people. That surely the Philistine army was going to be destroyed by the God of Israel. And it's crazy to think that, when I was reading this verse before, I was thinking, why would God allow 30,000 people to be killed? Why would God allow His own people to be killed? And all because of an ark. Do you guys know what an ark of God is? Or what the ark of God was?
Moses built the ark.
not the boat.
Oh, this is like kind of like a shuffle.
Like a what? No.
Isn't it like a house? It's like God's house, and there's like something inside of it, and then like the priest owned the high priest.
No. So the ark of God was a chest made out of wood, and on top it was like gold plated, and on top there was like, I think, 2 cherubims that were facing each other. So it was like a treasure chest, if you want to call it, but something of importance. And inside that thing, in the ark of God, was, I think, Aaron's rod, and I think some sample of like manna, which fell from the heaven, and also the 10 Commandments. So what do you think the ark of God meant to the people of Israel? What was the point of it?
We're very holy.
Okay, kind of. I mean, think about the things that were in it. The manna that God provided when they were looking for food, looking for meat, okay? And also the 10 Commandments, which is a pretty big part of the Bible. So what do you think the stuff inside the ark meant to the people of Israel? Obviously they were important. Obviously they were of great importance. So what do you think it was for? What was the purpose of it?
Greater importance.
For what? For greater or worse?
Spiritual reminder.
Yeah, it was a spiritual reminder. It was a reminder of what God had done for the people of Israel.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
What did you say? For greater importance. Okay. Anyway, so that wasn't it, but close. So here we have the Ark of God. Like I said, inside the Ark was Aaron's rod, was also manna, was also the 10 Commandments. And the Philistine people knew that whenever Israel fought with an army, that they would carry this Ark of God with them. And they knew that whenever they had the Ark of God, Israel would usually wipe out most of the enemies, wipe out the majority of anyone that they fought against. So the Philistine army knew this. They thought that, they were going to be killed, they were going to be slaughtered, and they were going to be destroyed just because of this Ark. But the thing, here lies the problem. The Israeli people thought that this Ark of God was the one thing that was going to save them. It was going to be one thing that was going to take them to victory and win this battle with the Philistines. But you got to understand that power wasn't inside of the Ark. Where was the power? Who had the power? God, right? It wasn't in some kind of physical object. It was inside the power of God. It was in God Himself. So here were these Israelites that were going into battle thinking that they had, the upper hand in that sense. But they go into war without God's power, but just a physical object of God. Obviously, they're going to lose the war. You know what I mean? The main purpose is who has the real power. It's obviously God. And this is why everything went wrong. And this is why they lost. The fact that, Israel relied on the physical object of God and thought it would be enough to protect them. While in reality, the power wasn't within the Ark of God. It was with God Himself. Amen. And in 1 Samuel chapter 4, verses 3 to 4, it reads, "And when the people were coming to the camp, the elders of Israel said, Wherefore hath the Lord smitten us today before the Philistines? The people are saying, Why did God allow us to be killed? Let us fetch the ark of the covenant of the Lord out of Shiloh unto us, so that when it cometh among us, it might save us from the hand of our enemies." That verse 3, the last part of verse 3 is very important. So it says, let us fetch the ark of the covenant, which is the thing we just talked about, the chest. And when it comes with us, it may save us from the hand of our enemies. They really thought that just by having the ark that they would win this war, that they would conquer the Philistines. And in verse 4 says, "So the people sent to Shiloh, that they may bring thence the ark of the covenant of the Lord of hosts, which dwelleth between the cherubims. And the two sons of Eli, Hophni, and Phinehas were there with the ark of God." So those were priests as well. So let's talk about another thing. What is a superstition? Or what is a superstitious belief?
Something that you should know.
Something that you should know?
Is it kind of common sense?
No. It has to do with like a belief. Maybe.
I love.
I heard this one, but I don't know what it
I saw one.
Can you guys give me an example of what a superstition is? Okay, like what? Like walking under a ladder, right? Or like, what's the other one? Seeing a black cat?
yeah!
Umbrella in the house.
I think that's a big one with Korean people, opening umbrella. Because I remember back in the day too, when I'd open an umbrella in the house, my parents would
Breaking
freak
a
out.
glass mirror.
Breaking glass mirror.
Seeing God's
Okay, so you guys know what a superstition is. Okay, so a superstition is, wow, I almost said something. Is a belief in something that happens that is caused by an event or an object or belief. So here was the Israeli people having a superstitious belief about the Ark of God. Does that make sense? They're thinking by just having this Ark that they would win over the Philistine army. But as we all know, we just read, 30,000 people were killed. And like I said before too, the Ark of God doesn't have the power of God. It was only physical objects. It was only material things. David? Well, they didn't, but we'll get into that in a little bit. So let's refocus. So here we see it's easy for us to make that same mistake, having a superstitious belief, having a belief, just by going to church, just by being here, that, we become a Christian. I remember teaching at churches before too, where I would ask a couple of teens, like, what makes you think you're a Christian? What makes you think you're a believer? He said, well, I come to church on Sundays. Like, isn't that enough? I was thinking, no. He's like, well, what if I come to church on like Wednesdays and Sundays and go soul winning? All this physical appearance, all this outward action is not going to do anything. Just by going to church, just by being in church, isn't going to make you a Christian. What makes you a believer? You guys know?
Believing in God, read the Bible, and
Having what?
faith in God.
Faith in God. And is faith preceded just by believing in Him, or by living it, by acting upon it? Okay, let's say David believes in God. Does that mean he's saved?
Yeah.
Yeah? Think about that. Why?
Because he thinks that God is the God. Like God.
Yeah. There's a verse in the Bible too where it says the devils know and believe in God. But that doesn't mean they trust in Him. It doesn't mean they have faith in Him. Does that make sense? So belief is one thing, but faith is another thing. We have to, put that forth into action. So it's very important to that. And because of this one simple mistake, 30,000 people were killed. And as it turned out, God didn't win the war because of their action. God wasn't expecting, the Israeli people to, twist His arm to do whatever He wanted. We see, God's not some kind of genie or some kind of angel that whenever we need problems or ask or want something, we pray to Him. There are times we pray to Him because we're thankful for, the life that we have. Maybe having a roof over our heads, maybe having a car, maybe having a vehicle, maybe having work. There's a lot of things that we can take for granted, but I feel like as believers, especially as kids too, I remember being in school, in high school, or even college, just praying about a test. Or praying about something that I physically needed or physically wanted. Maybe it was like a bill that I had to pay. Maybe it was like a test that I wanted to pass. Maybe because I wanted to get a girlfriend or something like that. Praying for things that really didn't matter, but in reality, I feel like every time I talked to God was when I needed something. Or was when I wanted something. It was when I desired something. Can you imagine being a parent having a son that always just talked to you whenever you wanted money? That'd be pretty messed up, right? That'd be pretty bad. Think about that. How many of us have done that? Go to our mom and dad, hey, I need some money to do something. And you never say anything throughout the day. Yeah, especially as, Korean parents, they don't take that lightly.
They tell us to use our own money.
Do you own money or allowance? Did any of you guys get allowance?
No.
Right? Sometimes?
What is allowance?
I feel like in the Asian community, kids never got allowance.
Giving money every week.
That explains a lot. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so let's refocus. So can idols be good things too? No. Can, let's say family or friends be an idol? Yes.
Oh yeah, because God is family.
What is an idol?
And I was
It's something
you admire.
It's something you believe
It's
and
somebody or an
worship.
object that you
Oh yeah.
Okay. Anything else? I'm looking for a different answer.
It's like a statue that you believe in.
Statue that you believe in.
Statue, yeah, idols.
It's an object or a human.
It's something that you put above God.
Yeah, something that you put above God. Not necessarily a statue of Buddha or Muhammad, but it could be, let's say, money, it could be a job, it could be friends, it could be family, it could even be kids. It could be even your kids or yourself.
It could be JPL.
So as a Christian, our main priority should be God only. And He should be the number one in our life. But if we have work and family and friends and we stress about that more than we do God, then we soon realize that we have an idol. I remember even in Bible college where, God's supposed to be first, and I always see these, not teens, but college students that would, stress over work, or stress over finances, stress over their car, stress over, money in that sense. And you would forget the reason why they're there. But the main priority is if you have God number one in your life, what's going to happen? What's going to happen with the rest of your life? That and everything else is going to fall into place. If you keep God first in your life, He will keep you first in His life. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So if we prioritize work and money and family and friends over God, our life isn't going to go the way it's supposed to go. I know idolatry is a thing where, like Joseph said, he immediately thought it was like some kind of statue or some kind of thing that we pray to or bow down to or give sacrifice to. But it's not just that. It's physical things. It's relationships. It's family. It's friends. It's money. It's physical objects in that sense. And if you think about it, idolatry is very, very prevalent in today's society. Like there's a lot of people that struggle with this. That struggle with, trying to keep family first. That struggle with trying to keep their friends first. That struggle with money in that sense. And they'll come to a point in their life where they really lose the concept of what the number one priority is supposed to be. When you guys get older, when you guys become adults in that sense, or young adults, you're going to understand what the importance of God is. You're going to understand why we have to keep God first in our lives. Because if you don't and you lose track of that, life is going to be hard. I mean, I'm 24 and I've been through a lot. And when I know I'm like young obviously still, but even as a teenager, even as a young adult, if we have an idol in our life, it will ruin our life. We'll put so much focus on that we forget that why we go to church, We'll forget why we read the Bible. We'll forget why we have Scripture in this sense. I remember hearing a story of a man named Edwin Cooper who was famous across America, but yet almost no one knew his real name. Coming from a family of circus clowns, Edwin Cooper began performing for an audience just when he was about 9 years old. After a stunt with the Barnum and Bailey Circus, he became a fixture of television in the 1950s as Bozo the Clown. In addition to entertaining both young and old people, Cooper had a message for his buddies and partners every single week on the television. His message was this: to get checked for cancer. Yet Cooper was so busy and working that he neglected to follow his own advice. By the time his cancer was discovered, it was too late for him to be treated. So his main message was to tell people, hey, every week you guys should get checked for cancer. Every sort of cancer you have, just check for it. And he told this every time he aired a show, or every time that he performed, or every time that he acted. But the thing is, he told everyone the same advice, but he didn't take his own advice. And to come to find out, he gets checked by the doctor, he has cancer, and I think he dies at the age of 45.
Oh,
And it's, what I'm trying to get to you is, as a believer, especially someone that's in a pulpit or like a pastor or a youth pastor or a missionary in a sense, if we tell people to live a certain way, especially as a Christian, we have to make sure that I live that. Does it make sense? Let's say David or Noah or David, you in that sense, you know, as a believer, as a Christian, we share the truth. We share the gospel. Hey, you need to stop cussing. Hey, you need to stop lying. Hey, you need to stop acting this way. Hey, you need to stop being disobedient. When we say that, we don't act that, that's not a good testimony, right? That's not a good example. We have to make sure that as a believer, we practice what we share. We practice what we preach. We practice what we tell people. People know you go to church, people know that you're a Christian, but now it's time to start acting like one, right?
yeah.
Whether it be in church, whether it be at home, whether it be at school, whether it be in the workplace. As a believer, we have to change. As a believer, we want to change. And it's something that's pretty important, I'd say. So here we come to the point of our story where the Israelite army was destroyed, where 30,000 people were killed, and the Philistine army is obviously happy. They're elated that they had just wiped out the Israeli army. So what they do as like a spoil of war is they take the Ark of God. And they take the Ark of Covenant with them because they just thought they had just killed the God of Israel. That this, faith and belief in the God of Israel was a lie, was a fake. Because why? Because they just destroyed them. They wiped out 30,000 people. So here was the Philistine people thinking that they had won over the Israeli army. I remember hearing another story about how these, you know those really big black horses that I think they're called Arabian horses? They're like, I want to say like 8 to 9 feet tall. They go like up here basically. So these horses, the way that they're trained in, I think like Afghanistan or Iraq and stuff like that, in Arabia, they're trained to fully obey their master, where the mind of the master and the horse becomes one. And the way that these horses are tested is what they do is they start these big horses, these giant machines of war, for I think like 3 to 4 days with no food and no water. And they do this every single week, and what they do is, obviously a horse not being able to drink, not being able to eat for 3 to 4 days is going to be very, very hard. And this is, remember, this is Arabia. This is like a hot desert. There's no water, there's no food, and this is where they train them. So what they do is they grab an Arabian horse, they put him in a desert, they don't feed it for 3 days, they don't let it drink for 3 days, and this is the day of the test. So what they do is they get the horse that's thirsty, that's hungry, and they bring it to a body of water. What do you think the horse is going to do once he sees the water? He's going to run to it and drink it, right? So right before the horse gets to the water, the master blows his whistle, yells at the horse to stop, and if it's a good horse, and if it really obeys the master, what do you think will happen?
He'll stop.
Yeah, even though it wants that water, even though it desires that food, it's going to stop, turn around, and come back to the master. And then what do you think the master's going to do?
Eat him.
Yeah, give it as much food as it wants, give it as much water as it wants. But if the horse doesn't do that, it's going to do this day after day after day after day, and it's going to keep training this horse until it learns that. Do you guys understand what I'm getting with?
Yes.
And especially as a Christian, we know that God knows our needs. We know that God knows our heart. We know that God knows everything that we want, everything that we desire, everything that we seek after. But to get everything like that, we have to learn to trust Him, to obey Him, to have faith in Him. Despite the circumstance, it seems God's will is always going to be true for the Christian. God's power is there for us to benefit from. Obviously, these huge horses that want that water, that want that food, know that their master is going to provide that. So no matter what the situation is, They will always listen. No matter what the circumstances is, they'll always pay attention. They'll always listen to the master. And as a believer, we ourselves have to do the same thing. We have to understand, despite how bad the circumstance is, God still has everything in control. And what we're going to get to in the next part is, even though, like I said, 30,000 people died, God's plan is still working. He's still working behind the scenes. And we're going to talk about that for next week. So for today, I just want you to understand the importance of what idolatry is and what it can do to us as a Christian. Making sure that we understand that we know that God has a lot for us, that He has a lot of knowledge for us, that He knows our heart, that He knows our will, that He knows our desire. So the best thing to do right now is to trust in Him, to obey Him, to pray to Him. And there's going to be a point in our life where we think that we know everything. We think that we're invincible, especially as young adults or as teens or even college students one day, where we figure out where we think we have our whole life planned out. But we understand we can't do anything without Him. We can't do anything without God. And understanding that. That's the main focus of what I want you guys to learn today. And then next week we'll do part 2 of Dagon the Fish God. So let's go and pray. And then I'll make one more announcement and then we'll be dismissed. Let's go and pray. Dear Lord Father, we just thank you for this day. Once again, just thank you for just giving me the opportunity just to share your word. Regarding idolatry, just pray that if we do have any idols within our heart, just help us to toss them out, to break them, and just to give them to you. And just help us to honor and glorify you, to have faith in you, and to trust in you. And we just thank you for this day. Just pray that you keep us safe for us today. Just pray that you be with us and travel back to our homes later on. And just thank you for everything. And we love you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Okay.